Hey everyone, it's Michelle at Needlepoint Junction, and I'm going to show you the Moorish stitch. The pattern on this is over one stitch, then over one hole, then over two holes, then over one stitch, then over one hole, and then over one stitch. So where I'm starting is over one stitch, and I'm going to repeat this pattern all the way to the end of the canvas. Well, of this particular row. Over one, over two, over one, over one stitch. So this stitch is similar to your mosaic stitch, except for it has a little bit of a variation. It's added some extra little dynamics into it. So this is over one, over two, over one, and then over one stitch. And then over one hole, over two, over one, and then over one stitch. Whoops, sorry. Over one hole, over two, over one, and over one stitch. And continue this. We'll be done in just a second. And once you've set it up, it's pretty easy to follow throughout the whole entire area. Two, one, and then over one stitch. So the question becomes, what do you do for the next row? The next row is all continental. So basically you're going to come back, and you can come back with a different color thread or the same color thread. And you're just going to go in one stitch, and you're going to do this on both sides. So pick which way you want to start, you want to continue, and then come back and do this. I always try to get a really full row as far as I can in order to set myself up so I don't fail. Otherwise, in the first couple of rows, you're going to have an awful lot of compensating to begin with, and that's the last thing you want to do. So make it as comfortable as you possibly can. There are some areas that are bigger than other areas. Like this area here would probably be a little bit bigger, but as long as I had a good grouping, I'm good. And then, like I said, this is continental all the way down. It's a really pretty pattern once it's done, and it really does remind me of some Moorish type of architecture and vases and things like that once it's completed. It's a really pretty stitch, and I have done it both with a single color thread, and I have done it with two colors. For my purposes and for this particular one, I'm doing it with one, but if you're going to do it with two, it would be this section here that you would do differently. Well, obviously both of them would be different. And you're just going to follow this all the way down. I know you're thinking to yourself already what happens in the next row. And the next row is going to be the same as the first row that you did, except for such and other stitches as well. Your longest stitch becomes your shortest stitch, and your shortest stitch becomes your longest stitch. Oops, it goes right. I think I made a mistake there. Hold on. I did. I want to go here. And then out one more. There you go. This is definitely one of the stitches that you have to kind of pay attention to, at least in the beginning. Otherwise, you end up missing it somewhere. I've done it 1,000 times. But strangely enough, it still seems to be one of my most favorite stitches. I don't know why. And you can see the really pretty pattern it's setting up. It almost looks as part of it is raised and the other part isn't. Even the dog wants in and he wants to see what I'm doing. Again, this is the continental stitch. It's just over one stitch all the way down the row. So every stitch has touched one of the other stitches. You shouldn't have to count it. Okay, and then I'll show you a couple stitches of the next row. And as I said to you before, I usually start on my longest stitch because that way I can set up the rest of the row. So here is my longest stitch right here. And we know that that stitch becomes your shortest stitch in this row. So I do that one. Then I do my, I come back this way and I do my over one. And then I do my over two. And that's that part of the row. And this one, you're going to follow it down to this particular stitch. And as long as you touch that other stitch and you're going into the same hole as that other stitch, you're going to line it up just perfectly. There's no way you can miss. But as I said, I take a point where I know I want to follow the design. And from there, I can go back one way in order to make it easy for me to follow the lines. And there you go. That's the Moorish stitch.